Hello. My name is Isabella, and at a family barbecue, my sister raised her glass, looked me in the eye, and said, "Is mooching your full-time job now?" Everyone laughed, like I was the joke, like I didn't feel it. But what they didn't know is that 2 weeks earlier, I'd bought the deed to the very house we were standing in. They thought they had silenced me for good. But you tell me, what happens when the quiet one finally speaks? It was one of those Texas afternoons that sat heavy on your skin, hot enough to melt butter on the porch rail. I pulled into the driveway of my sister's house, a familiar place that had never really felt like home. The air smelled like charcoal and sweet corn, the telltale signs of another gray family barbecue. I'd brought a pitcher of homemade lemonade, the kind my mother used to make when we were kids. It was my peace offering, though no one had asked for one. From the moment I stepped through the gate, I could feel the temperature drop, not the air, but the mood. Eloan was already at the grill, her laughter cutting through the yard like a rehearsed melody. She was the star of every family scene, always framed just right, always glowing. "There she is," she called when she spotted me. Her voice carried the enthusiasm of someone hosting a show, not greeting a sister. Isabella made it, everyone. And she brought lemonade. A few polite claps, a couple of nods. My brother Sable barely looked up from his beer. Mom waved from her lawn chair, her smile practiced and thin. Dad gave a small nod as if to say, "That'll do." I set the lemonade on the patio table beside a row of sweating wine glasses. "It's fresh," I said quietly, knowing no one would really care. "Of course it is," Eloan replied with that honeyed sarcasm of hers. "You've got time for that now, don't you?" I pretended not to hear it. I'd gotten good at pretending. I took a seat at the edge of the long table under the canopy, right beside Astria, Eloan's teenage daughter. She gave me a genuine smile, one that didn't come from obligation. "Aunt Izzy, this looks amazing," she said, pointing at the lemonade. "Thanks, kiddo," I replied, grateful for the kindness. "Your mom's party looks perfect as always." She rolled her eyes slightly. "It's not a party unless she's got an audience." That made me laugh softly. It was the kind of truth only someone too young to filter themselves could say out loud. The evening light began to settle, gold sinking into soft blue. The cicadas hummed in the background. Everything looked picture perfect, the glossy ribs, the sparkling glasses, the curated smiles. But sitting there, I felt like a guest in my own family. Eloan floated from group to group, a queen in her backyard kingdom. Her husband, Michael, was busy making sure everyone had enough to drink. Callista, our middle sister, sat near the fire pit, sipping Chardonnay and pretending she wasn't eavesdropping on every conversation. The rhythm of these gatherings never changed. There was always laughter, but never warmth. Dinner started the way it always did, Eloan leading a short toast about family and togetherness, everyone clinking glasses as if we all believed it. I tried to blend in, chewing on corn, nodding at small talk about home renovations and vacations I couldn't afford. Then, just as the plates were nearly empty, Eloan stood again. She raised her wineglass high, her diamond catching the light. "Before we wrap up," she said with a bright grin, "I just want to say how wonderful it is to see everyone thriving. Really, it warms my heart." I looked up, smiling politely. But then she turned to me. "And Isabella," she paused for effect, the way she always did when she wanted all eyes on her. "You've got to tell us, is mooching your full-time job now?" For a second, I didn't process the words. The laughter filled the silence before I could even react. Sharp, nervous, contagious. My brother chuckled into his beer. Callista covered her mouth, pretending to cough. Even Mom smiled, that small, apologetic smile that said don't make it worse. The world seemed to tilt slightly. I stared at Eloan, her flawless face glowing in the golden light, waiting for me to play my role, the quiet, harmless sister who laughs it off. I forced a small smile. That's a creative way to start a conversation. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. "Oh, come on," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "It's just a joke. You've got to learn to take one." "Sure," I said. "Maybe next time, make it funny." A few heads turned. The laughter faded, replaced by an uncomfortable shuffle of silverware. I could feel the sting behind my eyes, but I blinked it away. No tears. Not here. Dad cleared his throat. "Let's not ruin dinner," he muttered, staring at his plate. The conversation moved on. Weather, school, the price of gas. But I wasn't really there anymore. I was somewhere between the past and the ache that lived behind my ribs. I stared at my hands, remembering 100 moments like this one, smaller, quieter, but just as sharp. The birthday party, where they forgot to invite my friends. The Christmas, when my gifts were misplaced. The years of being the afterthought. When you grow up in a family that thrives on comparison, you learn to disappear before someone pushes you off stage. I caught Astria watching me from across the table. Her face looked uneasy, her fork still halfway to her mouth. For the first time, I saw the same confusion I used to wear at her age. That sense of this isn't right, but you don't know how to fix it. The rest of the evening blurred into polite conversation and the scraping of plates. I helped clear the table as I always did. Eloan didn't thank me. She never did. When I stepped inside to wash my hands, I looked at my reflection in the kitchen window, the soft glow of string lights behind me, the laughter still echoing outside. I didn't look angry, just tired. "You learn not to cry," I whispered to the woman staring back. Not at the table. Not in front of them. I took a deep breath and stared out the window again. Mom was smiling at something Eloan said, her hand resting on her shoulder. Sable was opening another beer. Callista was showing someone pictures on her phone. They all looked so content. But underneath it all, I could feel something shift, a quiet click inside me, like the first crack in glass. As I gathered my things to leave, Astria came to the door. "Aunt Izzy?" she asked softly. I thought what she said was mean. Her honesty almost undid me. "Thank you, sweetheart," I said, forcing a smile. "That means more than you know." She nodded, her eyes wide. "You're not a mooch." I laughed quietly. "No, I'm not." When I stepped outside, the night had cooled, the air heavy with the scent of smoke and cooked meat. I walked to my car, hearing Eloan's laughter again. Loud, confident, unbothered. Maybe she thought the night was over, that the joke had landed. But something in me felt different. Heavier, sharper, alive in a way it hadn't been for years. I started the car, headlights cutting across the yard. Eloan turned toward the light for a brief second, shielding her eyes. Our gazes met, hers smug, mine silent. I didn't know it then, but that single toast would be the last time they laughed at my expense. When I drove away from Eloan's house that night, the sound of laughter still clung to me like the smell of barbecue smoke. Even with the windows rolled down, I could hear it echoing, light, effortless, cruel in its ease. I told myself I'd forget it by morning, that I'd sleep it off the way I'd always done. But some things don't leave with the night. They settle, quietly, waiting for dawn to remind you they're still there. The next morning, I woke to sunlight slipping through the blinds. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was a group message, family chat. The one I was never really part of, but couldn't leave without looking petty. Eloan had sent photos from the barbecue. The kids playing in the yard, the table full of food, everyone laughing. Every image captured warmth, connection, a lie wrapped in good lighting. Under one of the pictures, Callista commented, "What a night. No one throws a party like you, Al." Eloan replied, "It's easy when everyone contributes in their own way." Then, a winking emoji. I stared at the screen for a long minute. It was her way of twisting the knife without ever holding it. I showered, dressed, and went about my day like nothing happened. I ran errands, picked up groceries, and even stopped by the small cafe near the lake for a coffee. But no matter where I went, that toast played in my head like a bad song on repeat. Every word, every laugh, every look of approval from my parents, it all looped together until I could almost feel the heat from the grill again. By late afternoon, I told myself to shake it off. I'd survived worse. But fate, or irony, had other plans. That evening, my phone rang. It was Eloan. Hey, sis, she said cheerfully, her tone sugar-sweet, rehearsed. Just checking in. You got home safe. I did, I said, keeping my voice neutral. Good. I just wanted to say no hard feelings about last night, okay? Everyone was just joking around. You know how our family is. Sure, I said. I know exactly how our family is. She laughed lightly, as if my tone didn't register. Perfect. Oh, and I might have mentioned to Mom that I helped you out when you lost your job last year. You don't mind, do you? People forget, and I just didn't want them to think you were struggling alone. The lie was so casual, so fluid, it almost sounded true. I paused. You didn't help me when I lost my job alone. I paid my own rent. Well, technically, she said, her voice lilting upward. You were staying in my guest house, remember? Rent-free, for months. I gripped the phone tighter. You charged me $1,200 a month. Oh, come on, she said, laughing. That barely covered utilities. You're welcome, by the way. I didn't answer. You're quiet, she said after a moment. Don't go getting defensive, okay? You know I love you. I just think people forget who's always been there for who. And before I could respond, she ended the call with a chipper. Anyway, love you, sis. Let's do dinner next week. I sat there, staring at my reflection in the black screen of my phone. It wasn't anger I felt at first, it was exhaustion. The kind that seeps into your bones, that makes you realize you've been fighting the same invisible battle for years. Later that evening, I drove to my parents' house. I told myself it was just to drop off some mail that had accidentally been sent to my address, but deep down I think I needed to see if they even noticed. They were sitting in the living room, TV humming low. My mother glanced up, surprised but not necessarily pleased. Isabella, we didn't know you were stopping by. I had some mail for you, I said, handing her the small stack. Dad muted the TV. You should have called first. I wasn't planning to stay long. An awkward silence filled the room. The faint smell of pot roast hung in the air. Mom finally said, Aloan called earlier. She said you two cleared things up. Did she? I asked softly. She said you took her joke too seriously, Dad added, his tone dismissive, like he was correcting a child. I looked at them, my throat tightening. It wasn't a joke. Mom sighed. Sweetheart, she didn't mean it like that. You know your sister. She teases because she cares. No, I said, shaking my head slowly. She teases because she can. Neither of them looked at me. Dad unmuted the TV. And that's when I realized the silence after humiliation hurts worse than the insult itself. Because silence means permission. It means agreement. I left without another word. The night air outside felt heavy, thick with humidity, and something else I couldn't name. I got in my car, started the engine, and just drove, nowhere in particular, just away. The radio played softly, a country song about broken families and bridges burned. It felt too close to home. When I pulled over near the lake, I rolled down the windows and let the warm wind fill the car. The sky was bruised purple, the water still. I sat there for a while, just breathing, just existing. That's when I saw Astria's message. A simple text. Are you okay? I stared at it for a moment before typing back. I'm fine. Then I deleted it. I didn't want to lie, not to her. So I wrote instead. Thank you for asking. That means a lot. Her reply came quickly. I thought what Mom said was mean. She does that sometimes when people don't clap loud enough for her. I smiled, a small, tired smile, the kind that felt like a bruise healing. When I finally drove home, the city lights blurred past me. I thought about every time I'd let things slide, every insult I'd swallowed just to keep the peace. Peace that only ever benefited the people who hurt me. That night, I lay awake for hours, the ceiling fan spinning slow circles above me. I could still hear Aloan's laugh, see the smirks, feel the weight of being the disappointment. But something inside me had shifted. I wasn't angry in the way I used to be, the kind that burns fast and fades. This was quieter, colder, the kind that waits. As I drifted toward sleep, I thought about all the times she'd rewritten our history, how she'd called herself the savior, when I was the one who had kept her secrets, the one who'd helped her climb back from her own messes. And then, like a spark in the dark, a memory surfaced. That night by the river, years ago, the one she never mentioned, the one I thought I'd forgotten. That night, I remembered something Aloan had long forgotten. I once saved her life, and she pretended it never happened. After I turned off the lights that night, sleep refused to come. The memory of Aloan's smirk at the barbecue still lingered behind my eyelids, sharp, bright, unbearable. I lay there, listening to the hum of the ceiling fan, trying to chase it away, but my mind had already wandered somewhere else. Not to the laughter, not to the humiliation, to a night years ago, one that Aloan had erased from her story entirely. The room around me was still, full of ghosts from another time. I was back in my old bedroom, the one with pale blue wallpaper and a crack above the window that looked like a lightning bolt. Mom never let anyone paint over it. It gives the room character, she used to say. I used to think she meant me. Now I knew better. I sat on the edge of the bed, the mattress dipping slightly under my weight. My fingers brushed against the nightstand where an old photo frame leaned against the lamp. The glass was chipped, the corner of the picture curling. It was a photo of Aloan and me at the lake. I must have been 23, she 28. She was smiling wide, her hair in perfect waves, her arms slung over my shoulders like she owned the world. I looked awkward, caught mid-blink, but still happy. Back then, I would have followed her anywhere. And I almost did. 12 years ago, Aloan wasn't the shining PR queen she is now. She was broke, heartbroken, and on the verge of losing everything. Her firm had collapsed after a scandal, one she never took full responsibility for. Her boyfriend had left her, her lease was terminated, and she'd been sleeping in her car for 3 nights before she finally called me. I still remember that call. Bella, she'd said, she only used that nickname when she needed something. Her voice trembled, soft and shaky. I'm in trouble. Real trouble. What kind of trouble? I'd asked, already reaching for my car keys. I lost everything, she whispered. I need a place to stay. Just for a few days. A few days turned into months. I gave her my spare room. I gave her my couch when she couldn't sleep alone. I gave her my savings when she couldn't pay rent. Every cent I had set aside for grad school, gone, handed to her in a tearful promise that she'd make it right. You're my rock, Izzy, she'd said, hugging me so tightly I could barely breathe. I swear, once I get back on my feet, I'll pay you back every penny. You'll see. And for a while, I believed her. She started rebuilding her PR firm from my dining table, using my Wi-Fi, my printer, my laptop, when hers died. I'd come home from work to find her pacing the kitchen, phone pressed to her ear, rehearsing her charm for clients who'd once fired her. And somehow it worked. Slowly, she began to climb again. But the thank you never came. A year later, I asked her once, gently over coffee. Hey, Aloan, do you remember the money I lent you? The 10,000. She laughed, stirring her latte. Oh, Izzy, you're so sentimental. We're family. It wasn't a loan. It was love. Love, I repeated. Of course. I mean, who keeps score with family, she said, flashing that smile, the same one she'd use on clients and cameras. I didn't say anything after that. I just nodded and smiled because that's what I'd been trained to do. Keep the peace. Let her shine. But sitting there now, in the quiet of my old bedroom, I felt something harden inside me, a realization that had been waiting too long to be acknowledged. Kindness in this family was never remembered. It was only used until it was no longer convenient. Outside, a car passed, its headlights slicing through the curtains. I leaned back against the headboard and let out a slow breath. For years, I'd let her version of events define me. The needy sister, the one who couldn't keep a job, the one always helped. But that wasn't the truth. The truth was, I'd been the safety net beneath her perfect life. The quiet hand that kept her from falling, only to be stepped on when she climbed out of the hole. I remembered the nights she'd go out networking, leaving Astria with me. I'd stay up until midnight helping that little girl with homework, braiding her hair, tucking her into bed with stories her mother never had time to tell. One night, when Aloan came home drunk, I confronted her. "You can't keep leaving her like this," I said. She laughed, wobbling slightly as she kicked off her heels. "Oh, please. She loves you. You're good at this domestic stuff. Let me handle the real work." "The real work?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Yeah," she said, pouring herself a glass of wine. "Building something that matters. You know, not everyone's cut out for ambition, Izzy. Some of us just have it." She didn't see the way I clenched my fists that night or the way I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw her clearly for the first time. I should have walked away then. But I didn't. Because I loved her. Because she was my sister. And now, years later, that loyalty looked a lot like foolishness. I stood and walked to the old dresser, pulling open the bottom drawer. Inside was a stack of old notebooks, journals from my 20s. I thumbed through one. The pages yellowed and soft. The handwriting on one page caught my eye, slanted, small, full of hope. "Maybe if I keep giving, they'll finally see me." I stared at the sentence for a long moment. My throat tightened. Then, without thinking, I picked up a pen from the nightstand, crossed out the lines slowly, deliberately, until the words disappeared beneath a sea of ink. Underneath, I wrote, "I see me now." The words didn't fix anything. They didn't erase the years of being dismissed, or the ache that came with remembering how much I'd lost for her sake. But they felt like truth, solid, unshakable, finally mine. I sat there until the ink dried, listening to the hum of the house settling around me, the creak of old wood, the faint ticking of the clock in the hallway. Somewhere downstairs, I could still hear the faint sound of my parents' TV, muffled laughter from some late-night sitcom. They were probably still watching reruns, blissfully unaware of the quiet storm brewing just upstairs. I placed the journal back in the drawer and closed it gently. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel small in that house. I didn't feel like the extra daughter, or the shadow in someone else's light. I felt grounded, aware, awake. The funny thing about memories, they don't fade, they wait. They wait for the moment when you're strong enough to face them without flinching. And that night, I was. I turned off the lamp and lay back down. The photo frame on the nightstand caught a sliver of moonlight, the crack in the glass shining faintly. It almost looked like a scar, something broken but still standing. As I closed my eyes, I knew this wasn't the end of anything. It was the beginning of reclaiming everything I'd given away. What they didn't know was, I had already taken back what mattered most. I carried the weight of that barbecue toast all the way home to my modest apartment in Austin. The dashboard light was dim, the city noises muffled, but inside the car I could still feel Aloan's grin flare like a spark. I told myself the rearview mirror held the past. Tonight I locked it behind me. It was 2 weeks later, early evening. I stepped through the front door of my place, dropped my bag on the hall table, and sank into the armchair by the window. The blinds were half drawn, the light low. I liked it that way. None of the glare of that yard, none of the laughter echoing in the wrong rooms. Here I could breathe. I cleared off the small dining table and flipped open a gray folder that had sat waiting in my safe for days. Inside was the deed to the Gray family home. My family's home. I stared at the small print, set my fingertips on the embossed name. I tipped the folder closed, then opened it again. I didn't just buy back a house. I reclaimed a childhood. The words felt heavy in my chest. I closed it and sat straight up. Months ago, I learned that our parents had quietly listed the property. They said it was for liquidation, downsizing, the usual polite terms. My cousin had whispered about the listing one afternoon at church, a conversation I overheard. I hung onto it like a lifeline. The timing, the price, they made no sense for the estate. That's when something clicked. I did my homework. Subtle background check, no alarms. I used Grandma Gray's surname for the title, paid in cash, moved quietly. None of them knew. The real estate agent didn't even know she was handling sibling-to-sibling transfer. My name appeared as Isabella Greenwood on the paperwork until the final deed bore Isabella Gray in bold. At that moment, the deed sat open before me. I remembered how I'd always been the one to step back, help quietly, keep my mouth shut, smile for the cameras. I've always believed in holding peace, in offering love that doesn't ask for credit. But peace isn't always proof of worth, and love isn't always remembered. 2 weeks had passed since the barbecue. The yard had healed. Leaves still glowed white gold under the Texas sun. Guests had gone home. The laughter left in its wake. I leaned forward and locked the folder in the drawer next to my basement desk. Safe, sealed, untouched. I moved my laptop to one side, cleared a cup of cold coffee, and sat back. I didn't need to show it now. I just needed it ready when the moment demanded. My phone pinged. A message from Astria. "Hey Aunt Izzy, everything okay?" I typed back. "I'll let you know soon. Thanks for checking." I closed the app.
No more texts for a while.
I sensed that something was shifting. I didn't rush it. I sat through the silence, watched dusk settle into night, and listened to the hum of the refrigerator. On the kitchen counter lay a stack of bills I ignored for weeks. Mortgage sketches, business receipts. None of it mine anymore. I poured a glass of wine. Cheap, but earned. And went back to the window. The sky melted purple. The silhouette of my apartment complex faint against it. For the first time in a long while, I felt firmly planted, not just in space, but in who I was. In that quiet, I spoke to myself. When it matters most, I'll show them. Not for validation, for liberation. That phrase had come to me weeks earlier while I drove to the lake, windows down, letting the Texas breeze press out of me. And now it radiated inside every part of me. I watched the streetlights flicker on, the distant sound of kids calling to each other after school. Life outside kept rolling. Inside, I prepared myself. I wasn't playing defense anymore. I was setting my own terms. I closed the blinds, the room lit only by the soft glow of my lamp. I thought about the storm they expected me to ignore. They never knew storms could start softly. No thunder at first. Just the steady turn of events. A quiet building of truth. My head tilted back against the chair. I closed my eyes, let the wine warm my fingers. I felt something, like the ground beneath me turning solid after a long time of shifting. A sigh caught in my throat. I didn't exhale it. Instead, I held it, as if by holding it I kept something alive. Then I whispered, not loud but firm, "They say some storms come without thunder." I was learning to become one. And just like that, I stood. It wasn't dramatic. No raised voice. No grand reveal. I reached for the folder, locked it again, turned off the lamp, and walked to the door. On the way out, I caught myself in the mirror. It wasn't just reflection. It was someone who had been invisible, now stepping into her own outline. The night welcomed me, and I walked into it sure of one thing. I wasn't waiting for permission. After that night, something inside me shifted, not loud enough for anyone else to notice, but I could feel it, steady and deliberate, like the hum of electricity before a storm. I told myself I was done waiting for the next jab, done letting them rewrite my life with half-truths and convenient omissions. I had the deed, the truth, and a growing patience that wasn't weakness anymore. It was control. 3 mornings later, the phone buzzed on my kitchen counter while I was pouring coffee. The name on the screen made me pause. Callista. Coffee?
Just you and me.
No drama. I promise, her message read. The word promise from her always carried a warning. Still, curiosity, or maybe instinct, pushed me to agree. I texted back a short, sure. 10 a.m. at Romer's Cafe. She answered within seconds. Perfect. My treat. The next morning was bright, deceptively calm. Austin in early fall had a way of making the air feel forgiving, crisp but not cold, the sky polished blue. Romer's was half full, the smell of roasted beans hanging heavy in the air, clinking cups filling the silence between songs on the radio. I spotted Callista by the window before she saw me. She looked perfect as always, hairstyled, nails immaculate, the kind of woman who could turn small talk into performance art. I walked over, and she rose to hug me like we were old friends who'd just lost touch, not sisters who'd spent years pretending affection. You look amazing, she said as we Saturday. I swear, you get younger every time I see you. Thanks, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. Compliments from her came laced with calculation. A waiter came by. She ordered a matcha latte. I asked for black coffee. She launched right into it. Small talk, laughter, harmless gossip. I let her talk, nodded in the right places. It was like watching someone perform a role they'd played for years, but no longer remembered why. Then, just as the conversation dipped into quiet, she leaned forward, voice soft, too casual. So, Izzy, rumor has it things are looking up for you. New car, nice apartment. You hit the jackpot or something. There it was. I sipped my coffee slowly. Rumor has it, huh? She laughed, waving her hand. Oh, don't be dramatic. I just mean after that whole thing at the barbecue. I'm glad you're doing okay. Must be nice, catching a break after everything. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. I stared at her for a beat. You mean after being humiliated in front of our parents? Callista blinked, then gave a polite laugh. Oh, Izzy, come on. You know Aloan didn't mean anything by it. You've always been so sensitive. There it was again, that word they used to shrink me. Sensitive. A synonym for weak in our family dictionary. I set my cup down carefully, the ceramic clicking against the saucer. You wanted coffee to talk about Aloan? No, of course not, she said quickly. I just thought maybe you'd want to clear the air. You know how rumors start. Rumors? Well, she hesitated, then shrugged with false innocence. People talk, Izzy. They say you've come into money somehow. That you've been lucky. I interrupted. She tilted her head. That's one word for it. Her tone was syrup sweet, but I could hear the acid underneath. They wanted to know. They always did. Not out of concern, but to measure me, to see if the little sister had stepped out of her assigned role. I smiled, slow and deliberate. You know what's funny, Callista? You only ask about my life when you think there's something to envy. Her face froze for half a second before she forced a laugh. That's not fair, Izzy. I care about you. I leaned back. You care about information. There's a difference. The silence between us thickened. I could hear the scrape of spoons, the faint buzz of a blender behind the counter. She reached for her latte like it was armor, stirring it though it didn't need stirring. I just don't want you getting involved in anything messy, she said finally, lowering her voice. People talk. I'd hate for Aloan or Mom to hear something unflattering. That was it, the warning dressed as advice. I took a breath, calm and steady. If you think I'm someone you can continue to rewrite, be careful. The next story you twist might choke on its own ending. Her hand froze mid-stir. She looked up, eyes wide for just a heartbeat before she caught herself. What's that supposed to mean? It means, I said, keeping my tone even, I'm not the one you get to narrate anymore. She let out a soft, nervous chuckle, trying to recover. You've changed. Finally, I replied. We sat there in silence, the kind that can't be fixed by sugar packets or polite smiles. For the first time, I saw the fear flicker behind her eyes, not of me, but of losing control of the version of me she'd helped build. The waiter dropped off the check. I slid a few bills under my cup and stood. Keep the change, I said quietly. Isabella, she called after me. I turned. Are you mad at me? I studied her face for a long second. The sister who used to braid my hair before school, the one who'd grown into someone who spoke in apologies that always came with disclaimers. I'm not mad, I said. I'm just done mistaking manipulation for concern. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. I left before she could find her footing. Outside, the air was warmer than I expected. The sun sat high, the smell of baked asphalt and roasted coffee mixing in the breeze. I walked down the block slowly, each step lighter than the one before. By the time I reached my car, I knew something had ended, not loudly, but completely. Driving home, I thought about all the years I'd tried to earn their affection through patience, through silence, through grace that was never returned. But grace without boundaries is just permission. And I was done giving permission. When I pulled into my driveway, I sat there a while, Engine off, windows rolled down. The world outside hummed along, indifferent, alive. That might have been the last time I called her sister, at least in my heart. I went inside, set my keys on the counter, and poured myself a glass of water. The reflection in the glass showed someone I barely recognized, calmer, sharper, finally free from the illusion of family loyalty that only ever went one way. In the quiet, I whispered to myself, they had their warning. And just like that, they crossed a line I'd warned them never to touch. It started with a forwarded email. I was sitting on my couch, a cup of tea in hand, when the message came through from an old family friend, one of those people who still believed in doing the right thing, even if it meant stirring up trouble. The subject line read, "Family meeting, estate restructuring." At first, I thought it was a mistake. Maybe I'd been included accidentally. But as I scrolled, I realized I wasn't even on the original thread. I'd been blind copied by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. My name wasn't anywhere in the email. Not once. It was a Lowen's message to the family lawyer, with copies to Callista and our parents. Words as sharp as polished glass. Given Isabella's history of instability and her ongoing financial dependence, I don't believe she should be included in estate planning discussions. This is for the family's long-term protection. Instability. Financial dependence. She'd painted me as a liability. I sat there, reading the sentence again, my pulse steadying into something dangerous. I could almost hear her voice, calm, reasonable, full of fake concern. The kind of tone she'd use to convince a boardroom or a church committee that her version of a story was gospel. But the truth? I wasn't the one who'd spent half her life rewriting history. I set my cup down, the porcelain clinking softly against the table, and opened my laptop. I stared at the folder that held the house deed, my fingers hovering over the edge of the screen. For days I'd told myself that truth didn't need an audience, that I didn't owe them a performance. But now, this wasn't about validation anymore. It was about clarity. They'd crossed the line I'd warned them never to touch. The Gray family estate meeting was scheduled for Saturday afternoon. Family only, the email said. No mention of me. No invitation needed. I arrived anyway. The house looked the same as always, perfectly groomed, like a Lowen's personality had been pressed into the hedges. The driveway shimmered with the kind of cleanliness that only money could buy, but the air felt heavy, stale. The same house I now legally owned. Through the window, I saw them gathered in the living room. My parents on the couch, Callista by the door, a Lowen at the center. Of course. She was standing, holding court, gesturing gracefully as she spoke to the lawyer seated beside her. Her voice carried through the half-open door like honey laced with venom. This family's legacy, she said, deserves to be protected from reckless decisions. We can't allow anyone's personal issues to jeopardize that. Personal issues. That was her polite way of saying me. I took a breath, straightened my jacket, and stepped inside. The chatter died instantly. Heads turned. My mother's hand went to her chest. My father muttered my name like a warning. Callista's expression flickered between guilt and curiosity. But Lowen, she just smiled, tight and practiced. Well, she said smoothly, if it isn't our prodigal sister. Didn't realize I needed an invitation, I replied, stepping fully into the room. This is a private matter, she said, voice cool. For family. I wasn't aware I'd been disowned, I said, walking past her. Though your email made it pretty clear that was on the agenda. The lawyer shifted uncomfortably. Ms. Gray, perhaps we should. It's fine, I interrupted, eyes locked on Lowen. Go on, please. Don't let me stop the performance. Her smile faltered. This isn't a performance, Isabella. It's about responsibility. Responsibility, I echoed. That's a new word for manipulation. Her face tightened. You've always had a flair for drama. And you've always had a talent for rewriting reality. The air thickened. No one moved. Even the lawyer seemed frozen in the crossfire. Then, without another word, I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder. I walked calmly to the table and laid it flat. The deed, crisp and official, gleamed under the light. Funny thing about legacies, I said quietly. Sometimes the one you ignore holds the key to it. For a full 5 seconds, no one spoke. Then my father leaned forward, squinting at the paper. Isabella, what is this? The deed to this house, I said. It's mine. Eloan's laugh was short, disbelieving. That's ridiculous. Is it? I slid the document toward her. Check the name, the signatures, the date of sale. You'll notice it happened 6 months ago, around the time you told everyone I couldn't afford my own rent. Her eyes darted across the page, the color draining from her face. Callista gasped softly. My mother whispered my name again, but this time it wasn't fear. It was awe.
How?
Eloan demanded finally. How did you even? You'd be amazed what people can accomplish when you stop assuming they're beneath you, I said. She looked up at me, eyes sharp, defensive. You bought it behind our backs? I bought it because you were selling it behind mine, I said evenly. You didn't tell me. You didn't think I'd find out. But I did. And I made sure the home we grew up in didn't end up in a stranger's hands. The room was silent again. Only the faint hum of the air conditioner filled the space. For years, I'd imagined moments like this, walking into a room full of people who'd underestimated me and watching their faces as truth rewrote their script. But standing there, I didn't feel triumphant.
Just calm.
Centered. Eloan's voice was smaller now. You could have told us. I did, I said quietly. In my own way. You just never listened. Callista was the first to break. Eloan, you said she couldn't handle money. You said she was. Enough, Eloan snapped, but her voice cracked. I looked at her, really looked at her, the woman who'd spent years dressing her cruelty as competence. For the first time, she didn't look untouchable. She looked exposed. This house is mine, I said, steady. Legally. I'm not here to throw anyone out. Not yet. But I'm done pretending you get to decide who belongs in this family and who doesn't. My father finally spoke. Isabella, you should have. Should have what? I asked, turning to him. Ask for permission to exist? He fell silent. My mother wiped at her eyes, unsure of which child to comfort. I have no interest in revenge, I said. But I do expect respect. And from now on, you'll give it, or you'll deal with me, not your imagination of me. No one moved. The quiet in that room was heavier than shouting. Eloan opened her mouth again, then closed it. Whatever she wanted to say, she couldn't. Not with the deed sitting there between us, proof that I'd stopped asking and started owning. I turned to leave, sliding the folder back into my bag. At the door, I paused, looked back once. You should probably tell the lawyer to update his notes. I'm no longer financially dependent. I walked out before anyone could respond. The Texas sun hit my face as I stepped outside, sharp and clean. My hands were steady, my pulse calm. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like the smallest voice in the room. But when you expose liars, they don't surrender. They scheme harder. It was only a few days after the confrontation in the living room, but in some ways it felt like a lifetime. The sun rose with the same expectance, the sky the same humility of blue, yet everything had shifted. When I sat down at my laptop that morning, I wasn't thinking about revenge. I was thinking about survival. I checked my phone before I sat down, text from a friend. Hey, are you okay? I saw Eloan's blog, my breath caught. Blog? On a local gossip site? I opened the link. There it was, a post, spelled out like a whisper passed too loud in a boardroom. No names, of course. But the details were unmistakable, someone close, someone from my family. Struggles with finances, emotional instability, substance dependence. The post read. Paranoia about her own family. Would family legacy weather this? Comments followed. Sounds serious. I always wondered about that one. When will she get real help? My heart hammering, I moused over the user profile. Anonymous sister. The irony didn't escape me. Instead of fury, I felt a sickening sense of violation. I closed the laptop, stood up, paced my apartment, the hum of the air conditioner a constant. I poured a glass of water and drank slowly. My head cleared. I may not be the loudest voice in the room, but I knew how to listen and how to react. Valora's name popped into my mind, our family's longtime friend who had seen things other members of the family preferred to ignore. I sent her a message. Need to talk. She answered quickly. Now. We met that afternoon at a quiet public park bench under oaks that had stood long before our family drama started. She leaned forward, voice low. Eloan's been prepping this for weeks. She's terrified you'll surface with something, anything, that ruins her clean image. My pulse rose. So she hides the deed? Let's say she's exposed it. Valora shook her head. She's not just afraid of losing power. She's afraid of you finally using yours. I felt a moment of truth wash over me. Yes, I'd stopped being the victim. I was becoming a threat. I walked home as the light softened, shadow edging in. The world was quiet, but inside me stormed. At my door, I didn't immediately go to my laptop. I grabbed my coat and headed out to the old church parking lot where Mom had an appointment. I parked near the lot's edge and saw Eloan walk out arm in arm with my mother. She spotted me, her step faltered. Eloan, I said quietly, can we talk? She measured me before nodding. We walked to a safer distance, metal chairs under a pavilion far from the church doors. She pulled my arm, voice urgent. If you post the document, I'll lose everything. My business will collapse. My reputation. You know what I mean. I let the words hang. A confession. Her tone was not one I recognized, something cracked behind it. I do know what you mean, I said. And that's exactly why I'm not going to hide anymore. She stared at me, fully vulnerable for perhaps the first time. Couldn't you just let this go? You could be part of the family again. I considered the offer for a moment. Not from the sister I thought I knew, but the businesswoman in her own script. Family again, I repeated softly. I don't if I ever was part of what I was told. And I won't let silence or fear define my role any longer. She swallowed. I'm scared, she admitted. I took off my coat and draped it on the chair back. Good, I said calmly, because I'm done letting others define what I'm allowed to be. At home, I opened the laptop. The cursor blinked at me. I drafted a post. Fact-based, simple. A timeline. A few scanned letters.
The deed.
A short message. I saved that home. You didn't. Here's the proof. I didn't publish it yet. I stepped back, took a sip of lukewarm tea, and closed the computer. The storm was not public yet, but its foundations were set. The wind outside rattled the window screen. I sat in the half-dark, the hush of the night pressing in. I wasn't loud. I didn't need to be. When you've lived in someone's shadow long enough, your truth becomes sunlight. In the quiet, I made a promise. I won't wait or warn again. So I posted it, and waited for the storm. I posted it late in the afternoon, just before the house lights started flickering on across my neighborhood in Austin. The deed, the emails, the transfers, they were all there, laid bare and unfiltered. I hit share, and then sat back, the room quiet except for the hum of the computer and the slow tick of the clock. My palms rested on the edge of the table, but my heart felt oddly calm. This time, I wasn't bracing myself for pain. I was witnessing its beginning. Within minutes, the notifications began. Together at last, I knew she'd stand up. Wow, I scrolled, watching the thread grow. Something that had been hidden for years turned into daylight with a few clicks. I hadn't used the word family. I hadn't named names. I simply told the truth. Sometimes truth is the thunder. They just didn't know how to hear it. In the next hour, there were emails, text messages, even a voicemail from an aunt I hadn't heard from in a decade. Isabella, I'm so sorry. I always wondered. I listened to the voice message twice. My spine straightened. That noise inside, one I tried to quiet all my life, started to quiet itself. It wasn't gone. It wasn't muted. But it was no longer frantic. Then came the calls. Eloan's name flashlit my phone. I didn't answer. I didn't expect to. I opened a new tab, the the Gray family website, and watched a banner change from her company's logo to a spinning wheel. "We'll be back shortly." I smirked and closed it. Her perfect image was wobbling. The next morning, the paper headline read, "Local PR firm leader steps down amid controversy." My heart ticked. Vindication felt odd. It didn't taste like champagne. It tasted like old coffee, strong, necessary, a little bitter. I poured a cup and stood by my window. The sky edged into blue, the air crisp with early fall promise. That evening, I drove to the old house again. Legally mine now, but still warm with memories I didn't want and still haunted by names I never claimed. I parked in the driveway, the siding shining pale gold in the sunset. The place felt different, no longer a cage, but an anchor. Aloan pulled up in a black SUV, suitcase on the passenger seat. Her presence looked smaller. I watched her step out, posture tight, scanning the porch as I stepped forward. She said, "Isabella, we need to talk." I didn't wait for her to invite herself in. I stood beneath the porch light, arms crossed. "We're talking," I said. Her voice quivered. "I made mistakes." "Go on," I said, my voice steady. "I thought I was doing what was best for us." "For me or your image?" I asked. She hesitated. I don't think you ever gave me the chance to explain." My echo came quiet. "You didn't need to explain. You needed to act differently." Her eyes flicked to the door. I kept stepping forward. "You laughed when they mocked me. You watched me disappear in this house. But I'm done disappearing." She reached for the handle, looked back at me. "Please. This house is not about revenge," I said softly. "It's about truth. You've been running on your version of events for years. Now you live with mine." She backed away and turned to leave. I didn't close the door behind her. The cool air brushed against my skin. I watched her drive off, the tail lights retreating until the road swallowed them. My breath exhaled slow and sure. Walking inside, I poured another cup of coffee. The house lights were on, strings of small bulbs around the patio, the ones Mom used to set up at summer picnics when I was a child. I turned them off one by one, the glow shrinking until I was in soft dark. Standing at the window again, I watched the sky fade. The shape of the horizon was familiar, but every time I looked at it now, I felt it differently. Ownership isn't just about having something, it's about knowing you're allowed to belong. The next morning, the sunrise came, and I didn't flinch. The world kept spinning. I walked to the porch step, hands in my coat pockets, the air cool but steady. No one was outside. It was quiet, and for the first time in a long time, that felt okay. I didn't need to evict them. I just needed them to know the truth. And the truth was loud enough. Silence stretched between afternoons, evenings, the days that follow when the storm has passed, and you're left with something clearer than thunder. I embraced it rather than scared off by it. I stood in my parents' house yard, my own yard, really feeling something I didn't recognize at first. Freedom. Peace. Maybe even hope. The porch swing creaked in the breeze as I sat down. I let my gaze travel over the yard we'd all once shared. The trees, the laughter echoes, the memories that had turned brittle with time. I set my cup on the step. I didn't look back. The first time I turned the key in the old door lock of the Gray family home since everything fell apart, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt quieter. A kind of stillness I hadn't known I was looking for. I stepped inside, the floorboards creaking softly under my boots, and the weight that used to press down on my shoulders finally loosened. The house was exactly the same. Every piece of furniture, the same drapes, Mom's favorite floral armchair in the living room. But it felt different. The whispers, the sideways glances, the comparisons hanging in the air like smoke, they were gone. I wandered through each room, touching old photo frames, seeing our faces frozen in time. There was Callista at her high school graduation, Sable holding a little Astria in his arms, Aloan beaming in her first job promotion picture. And then there I was, always the one on the edge, always the one looking in. But now I was inside. The hallway led me to my old bedroom. I paused at the door, hands at my sides. Inside, the pale blue wallpaper still bore its crack, The one my mother said gave character. I walked in, stood in the center, and realized it no longer controlled me. I didn't rush across the room to see if the bed had been moved. I didn't check the closet for hidden boxes of childhood memories waiting to be compared. I just stood. The room that had made me feel small now made me feel solid. Later that afternoon, after I'd walked the length of the home and let the silence settle, I went to the porch. The golden light of early fall in Austin washed over the boards, and for the first time I sat there without a guest, without pretending. No distractions, no impression to make. I looked at the yard where we'd grown up, the trees casting long shadows across the grass, the swing set resting at the edge of the property. I felt the pulse of memory in that space, but not the ache. Instead, I felt permission to own it. That permission carried me to afternoon when the doorbell rang. I opened the door and there stood Astria, 17, tall for her age, hands tucked into her jacket pockets, looking uncertain. Her eyes held something new, recognition, or maybe guilt, or maybe courage. "Aunt Isabella?" she said softly. "Hey, kiddo," I answered, motioning her inside. We walked to the porch swing together. I sat and she sat beside me, feet dangling. Silence settled for a few moments, not awkward, just needed. Then she turned to me. "I just wanted to say I know what they did. I saw it." My throat closed for a second. I nodded. "Thank you for telling me that." She shifted. "I didn't know how to help. I thought maybe you were okay. You always said you were." Her voice cracked. "I'm sorry." A smile found me before I realized I'd allowed it. "That means more than you know," I said quietly. "Sometimes the smallest act is the first step." She looked out at the yard. "Do you think could I help you stay here?" "You already are," I said. We didn't speak for a while. Just let the air hum between us. Then she asked about my apartment, about writing, about what I planned. I told her truthfully, I didn't know exactly yet. "I'm learning to live without waiting for stories about me to be rewritten," I said. The porch swing creaked as the sun moved lower. Later, back inside, I cleared off a small desk and retrieved my journal. I opened to a blank page and wrote, to myself, "Thanks for holding on. Thanks for believing you're worth the space you take up." I folded the letter and placed it in the drawer beside the deed, next to a key I found buried in the bottom of a box, the key to the front door of the house. My hand lingered on the metal. That key used to open a door I felt trapped behind. Now it opened a door I walked through. I didn't rush out the back door. I strolled through the yard as dusk pressed in. The air cooled, and the scent of cedar and old pinyon drifted in. I watched the house lights flick on one by one. I paused at the edge of the property, turned around, and took one last look at the home that used to feel like a stage built by someone else's script. I thought about justice, not loud, not dramatic, but quiet, inevitable, just like truth and time. Standing there, I realized healing doesn't always roar. Sometimes it comes with the hush of a porch swing and a cup of coffee in your hand. Sometimes it's the moment you stop looking behind you and look out only. And so I stepped inside, closed the door, and didn't look back. Justice didn't need noise, just truth and time. Sometimes, the loudest victories are won in silence, not with shouting, not with fists, but with truth, patience, and self-respect. Isabella's journey wasn't just about reclaiming a house. It was about reclaiming her worth, her voice, and her peace. What would you do if the people who were supposed to protect you were the ones who hurt you most? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and if this story moved you, don't forget to like, share,